Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Just Trying to Survive and Learn to Love Along the Way. This will be Part 21, Chapters 40 and 41. Chapter 40, Of Fear and Fire. Eijiro is surprised to see Monoma from 1B already in the classroom with Vlad King. Oh, wow. So many from the mighty 1A failed their test. You're no better than us, weirdo. Eijiro snickers at Kaminari's comment. Their class sits down on the opposite side of the class from Monoma. The boy sneers at them but doesn't object to the distance. Before long, they're hard at it, going over stuff that Eijiro had been over 1,000,000 times with Katsuki. This sucks, because it's not the written portion he failed, but the practical one. They're not working for very long before there's a loud noise from outside. Eijiro dismisses it, assuming it's from whatever the rest of their class was doing. There's another noise, and Aizawa-sensei stands, gaze unreadable as he stares out the window. Vlad, watch the kids. The other pro nods, and their teacher is off. Eijiro and the others watch out the window as he runs into the forest, where smoke is slowly creeping out of. It's silent for a few moments before another noise sounds out, much closer than before. He tries to focus on his work, but whatever's going on is just distracting enough that he can't continue. None of his classmates are working either, and Vlad King doesn't seem in a hurry to get them back on track. Eijiro turns back to the front of the room as Vlad King moves toward the door. He's got a concerned frown on his face, and his gaze slides over the window instead of them when he turns back to speak. Stay here. I'm going to see what's going on. Oh man, Aizawa-sensei is going to be so mad when he returns and sees that Vlad King left. Not 2 minutes after he's gone, the door cracks open again, and Eijiro turns back to his books, expecting Aizawa-sensei to be disappointed that they're not working. He doesn't look up until he's grabbed and thrown across the room. It's so unexpected that he doesn't even activate his quirk. He sits up and stares at the scene. Blue flame eats at the desk that he had been seated at, and Sato stands nearby, clutching at his arm. Eijiro stands and shuffles over to his classmates, looking to the front of the class. There stands someone that is definitely not Aizawa-sensei. The man is heavily scarred, blue fire in hand, with a maniacal grin on his face. Now that I've got your attention, I need some information. Like we'd tell a villain anything. The cry comes from Sato, still standing near Eijiro's flaming desk. The villain gives him a bored look and shoots fire again, catching Sato's side as he doesn't dodge fast enough. I just need the location of Midoriya Izuku and Bakugo Katsuki. I'll even let you kids live if you tell me. He needs what? What does he want with their classmates, with their friends? Everyone huddles a little closer. They can't betray their friends. Besides, even if they wanted to, the only answer they could give would be too vague. Eijiro stands frozen at the front of the group. He doesn't know what to do. They haven't trained for this. He makes eye contact with Sato and finds a grim look on his classmate's face. Fine. Looks like I'll get to persuade you then. The villain turns his hand towards the group of them, and Eijiro hardens himself as the man releases his quirk. The others hide behind him, trying to stay out of the way of the blast of fire directed at them. He squeezes his eyes shut in preparation for what's to come. However, the fire never hits. Eijiro opens his eyes, quirk still active, and finds himself face to face with Sato. He can still feel the heat of the fire, and he catches little glances of blue behind Sato's pained face. He jumped in front of the fire, using his considerable bulk to protect the rest of them. The flame dies out a little until they can see the villain standing directly behind Sato. He places his hand on the back of their classmate's head, and then there's blue fire leaking from between his fingers. Sato screams, and it's an awful thing that has everyone covering their ears. Eijiro lurches forward, reaching for Sato, but the moment he does, the boy's eyes roll back in his head and the villain lets go of him, letting him fall forwards. Eijiro catches him as he does, gagging at the smell of burnt flesh coming from the boy in his arms. The villain raises his hand again and Eijiro carefully puts Sato down, trying to get him out of the way as he hardens and stands, covering as much space as he can in front of his friends as the fire reaches them. It's hot, but not overly so, his quirk doing its job of protecting them. It's gone just as quickly as it arrived, but Eijiro doesn't lower his arms. He keeps them crossed in front of his face, peeking above them to see what the villain is doing. He looks gleeful for a second, glancing down to where Sato lies. Eijiro looks down as well, and he can't even tell if the other boy is breathing. The villain roughly kicks his body to the side and ignores everyone's cries of protest as he meets Eijiro's eyes. As soon as he does, his face changes, going from gleeful to angry in a matter of seconds. He sets a wall on fire. The villain doesn't give them time to process that and turns his blue flame back on them. Eijiro hears a cry of pain behind him and he tries to widen his stance to protect them better. He doesn't know how long he can last. He's already exhausted from a whole day of training his quirk, and this isn't the first late-night remedial class they've had. He can feel his quirk wavering, but he pushes himself. He needs to last until Aizawa-sensei returns. He can feel the pain now, his quirk failing in his arms and letting the fire touch him. He grits his teeth against the pain and stays standing. It's becoming unbearable when the fire stops again. Eijiro takes a second to breathe before looking back up at the room. 3 of the walls are on fire now, and he can hear his friends coughing behind him. His eyes find the villain, who stands even closer than he did before. Before he can react, he reaches out and grabs Eijiro by the neck, hauling him off the ground. He grabs at his wrist, trying to pry the fingers away, but the hand just tightens and heats up, nearly cutting off his air supply. His friends start protesting, but the villain keeps his eyes on Eijiro, grinning, a wild look in his eyes. He gets the message and drops his hands. The grip loosens enough for him to breathe a little more deeply. Now, unless you want another one of your little friends to die, one of you is going to tell me the location. Eijiro shakes his head as much as he can, and the villain tightens his grip, bringing a flaming hand up to his face. Eijiro tries to focus on breathing, but all the air available to him is simply gone. He can't draw in a single breath. He starts struggling, mindful of the fire by his face. Wait! We don't know where they are. They're doing an exercise in the forest, and they started after we left. He distantly registers Mina's voice, but he can't focus on it. The only thing he can focus on is the fire in his lungs and the vice around his throat. Well, I thank you for your cooperation. Instead of dropping him, the villain moves his flaming hand closer to Eijiro and tightens his hand even further than he thought possible. He shuts his eyes as the blue fire draws nearer, and the last thing he feels is the heat on his cheek before passing out. Chapter 41. Of Villains and Victims. Something is not right. Shouta rushes out of the classroom at the strange noises, leaving Vlad in charge of their students. The forest is smoky. It gets thicker the further he goes, so he brings his goggles up over his eyes before adjusting his scarf over his mouth. He runs, mindful of his breathing, and nearly collides with a student. They seem to be fine, so Shouta sends them back to the cabins and continues on. He makes sure to stay vigilant. The forest wouldn't spontaneously combust, so who the hell set the fire? Villains is the most likely answer. But how the hell did they find the place? The school had only chosen this location the day before they left, and only a few pros knew about it. Only a handful of people not present know where they are, and no matter how stupid Shouta thinks All Might is, the man isn't a traitor. So how? He tries to come up with someone who would betray them like that, but Shouta knows his students well enough to be confident that it's not one of them. One of Vlad's kids, then? He doesn't know his class all that well. Or at all, really. It's not long before he encounters a student that's not fine. They're leaning up against a tree, breathing heavy through all the smoke. They look just about ready to pass out, so Shouta lightly throws them over his shoulder, before heading back the way he came, gathering up more students as he goes. They support each other, many students sporting some sort of minor injury. A few of his own students join the group on the way back to camp, and the group grows to 15 before they reach the outskirts of the forest. Right where the smoke should be getting thinner, it doesn't, but there's no way Shouta took a wrong turn, so he quickens his pace a little. He exits the forest and hands his charge to another student before sprinting forward. The cabin that holds the classroom is on fire. A few students hang around, staring up at the flames, but he doesn't spot any of the ones he'd left behind. He heads for the door and runs into Vlad, who's frantically tugging on the handle. "Vlad, where are the kids?" The man just looks at him, a grim look on his face as he shakes his head. Fuck. Shouta uses his scarf to tear open the door and he sprints inside, using his memory to guide him towards the classroom. He can hear Vlad's loud footsteps behind him, but he ignores him, instead focusing on his internal map of the place. The smoke gets worse the closer they get to the classroom. Shouta takes as deep of a breath he can before pushing the door open, careful not to draw attention to himself. The room is on fire. Most of his students stand huddled in the center of the room, while Sato lies a little further away. There's a villain standing right in front of them, holding Kirishima up by the throat, a flaming hand by his red face. "Well, I thank you for your cooperation." The villain moves his flaming hand closer to his student's face, and that's all it takes to snap him into action. He activates his quirk, not a moment too soon. The second after he does, the villain's hand makes contact with Kirishima's face. The villain turns towards them when his flame goes out and pouts. Fortunately, the flames crowding the walls and roof die down as well, leaving the room smoky, but fire-free. "Aw, Eraserhead. Why'd you have to ruin my fun?" His students all turn towards him, looks of relief on their faces. "I'd appreciate it if you'd step away from my students." The villain actually complies, dropping his hand from Kirishima's face as he goes. His hand around his throat stays where it is. The boy's eyes are closed, and Shouta can see where his lips are starting to turn blue from the lack of oxygen. "All of them." He sends a meaningful look towards Kirishima, and the villain follows his gaze. "Oh, my bad, Eraserhead." It's said with a smile, and the villain doesn't give his student a second look before he's tossing him in Shota's direction. He catches Kirishima and quickly lowers him to the ground, moving to check his vitals while Vlad hopefully keeps an eye on the villain. He very carefully checks the pulse point on his wrist, wary of touching the boy's throat, but also trying his best to avoid the numerous burns on his arms. Kirishima lurches up, nearly smacking his head into Shota's where he's leaned over him. His student is coughing and gasping for breath, hands reaching for his throat. Shouta stops their progress, and Kirishima's eyes snap open. He relaxes at the sight of his teacher, and Shouta gently places him on the floor before standing and facing the villain. He nudges past Vlad and strikes out with his scarf. The villain ducks to the side, and Shouta has to alter his move quickly to avoid hitting his students. This space is too confined for a proper fight, and the villain clearly knows that. Vlad works his way around the classroom, making his way towards the kids. The villain pays him no mind, attention drifting between Shouta and the kids. Clearly he's decided that Vlad isn't a threat. He raises a hand towards the students, and Shouta is quick to reactivate his quirk. The villain frowns at him, and Vlad leaps from where he'd moved to, effectively knocking him to the ground. He's quick to immobilize him with his blood, and the villain slumps down, a defeated frown on his face. Shouta rushes to Sato, who's still unmoving on the ground. His back's a mess of burned skin, and the back of his head is almost unrecognizable. He carefully flips him over and frowns. The boy's eyes are open, distant and unseeing. He checks his pulse just to be sure, and finds nothing. Is he okay? He looks up and finds Mina, a hopeful look in her eyes. He just shakes his head. Her face falls and she turns away, in some sort of attempt to remain composed. Shouta takes a moment to check out the other students' injuries. Kaminari and Mina have a few burns lining their arms and legs, while Sero and Monoma are practically unscathed. His 3 students are huddling together, while Vlad's kid stands a bit further away. There's a loud groaning sound, and a piece of ceiling falls. Fuck, we need to get out of here. At least most of them are relatively uninjured. He looks over to Kirishima and finds him struggling to stand, hand hovering near his throat as he continues to take gasping breaths. Vlad, I need you to carry Sato. The man nods and steps away from the villain, picking up his student's body as carefully as he can. Monoma, Sero, you guys need to help Mina and Kaminari. Monoma reluctantly wraps his arm around Kaminari's waist, while Sero looks more than happy to help his classmate. Shouta whips out his scarf, wrapping the villain up. He turns and heads over to Kirishima, dragging his scarf behind him. He offers his arm to the boy. Here, you can lean on me. Kirishima latches on with shaking fingers, and Shouta begins to lead the way out of the building, Vlad taking the rear of the group. When they make it outside, there is a much larger group of kids than there was before. He tries to locate all of his students and finds almost all of them. Only Izuku, Bakugo, Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki are nowhere to be found. It looks like all of Vlad's kids have returned, so it's only those 4 that are missing. He heads towards where some of the pussycats are herding the injured students and helps Kirishima sit. He starts to move away, but the boy just clutches his arm harder. Sensei, wait. He breaks off coughing, voice raspy and dry-sounding. Shouta faces him and finds a worried frown on his face. They're after Izuku and Katsuki. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 41 of Just Trying to Survive and Learn to Love Along the Way. Chapter 42 will be up next. Definitely some somber chapters here with these 2 that we listened to today, and Aizawa coming back to find the loss of a student, as well as trying to salvage the students that are still there and get them to safety. Of course, we also have him learning the news that Bakugo and Izuku are being targeted. So definitely some turning points taking place throughout these chapters. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions, so drop your comments below for me. Just a reminder that this fic is located on AO3, so you can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.